My Hare Krishnas to all the devotees on the call. And although we're a little bit out of it, but Janmashtami greetings to everyone, because these festivals are never just one day, they go on for some several days. And what I'd like to do, I'd like to actually start this as an introduction to a series of classes saying Surrendering to Krishna is the title. And today is just an introductory into that, but I'd like to go that way. So just do the invocations and then we can make a start. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya. Chakshunmilitam yena tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam yena Bhutale. Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam. Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Rakunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadhuetam Sarvadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamsta He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute He Tapta Kanchana Gorange Radhe Vrindavanishware Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Panamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhaevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Sivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So again, my greetings to everyone. Welcome you, and I thank Nabi and Jayanti for the opportunity to be speaking something. All glories to my Guru Maharaj and Srila Prabhupada. And what I would say, because this is a mixed audience, I have to give one apology for the senior and experienced devotees. I have to give the apology is that it may seem very simple and very basic. But I'd say to you, learning takes place in different ways, because the majority on this forum will be devotees who are new to Krishna consciousness and trying to establish their spiritual life. So therefore, as a speaker, you quickly find out that it doesn't matter how much you put into a class, and the hour may seem very long. At the end of it, when you're reviewing it within yourself, you always feel, I missed this out and I missed something else out, because actually you cannot cover everything in one class. Even though you may be an eloquent speaker, even though you may have done a lot of diligent research and made it as tight as possible, the subject is far too vast to cover in one class. So therefore, we are coming to the conclusion that a series of classes where we don't have to rush, we can actually take the subject in a more detailed way, but it also means taking it from the point of as near the beginning as possible. And therefore, for the advanced devotees, the more experienced devotees, yeah, it is be like ABC. But you know, one of the funny things about that is that most of the things in life that we go on to be proficient in, they start with just a few basic techniques. You know, those of us who have done sports, those of us who have done trades, those of us who are musicians, you learn the basic notes and you go on to play in music, for instance. It's the basic notes from which you use them to do many repertoires. Those who do sports, I did martial arts. It's only a few basic techniques, and you go on to do endless varieties and combinations from that. So in this way, the basic techniques of anything are always good to actually be more proficient in. So in that way, learning may not be new for those devotees, but also there's confirmational learning. I know what I know, and I'm going to continue to do it and find another permutation by which I can keep applying it to myself and to my preaching. So that being said, this is, the agenda for those oncoming classes. The theme is surrendering to Krishna. And some of the topics will be, what does it really mean? What does surrender really mean? And we'll cover some of that today. And then why do we find it so difficult to surrender? That is a very important question, because everybody struggles with it. There is not a devotee who is not struggling to surrender. It's just simply the degree. The surrender is on a continuum, but why do we find it difficult? We'll explore that. And then why is it demanded by the Lord? Why does the Lord, he demands it. There's no ways around it. He tells it very plain. And we'll look at the Lord's plain speaking. We look at the Acharyas plain speaking about the demand for that surrender. And why is it connected to spiritual master and sadhus? There's a connection. We'll explore what that is. And why is it connected to the Shastras, Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam in particular? We'll explore that. And why do we need to understand, the whole thing about surrender? It's very central to us making spiritual progress, so we need to understand that. And why do we need to fully surrender? Can partial surrender? Well, I'm halfway surrendered. I'm more surrendered than I was last week or last year. But why do we need to fully surrender? That we need to understand, and we'll explore in full. So all these topics we will explore as fully as we can, including leaving time for questions and answers. And I'm hoping that you will find them valuable. So what is the meaning of surrender? We all have a concept, but the dictionary tells us it's to stop resisting to an enemy or an opponent and to submit to their authority, to give up, and we all know, hands up, I surrender, don't shoot. We all know that. To give up, a handover, our rights, possessions, typically out of compulsion. So, but it doesn't always have to be by compulsion. But if we take the meaning, to stop resisting, to submit to authority, that's part of the definition of surrender. And then other useful words that are there: to capitulate, to give in, to give up, to yield, to concede, to submit, to relinquish, to renounce, forego, and forswear. So all these words are indicators and meaning of surrender, So you've got a sense of what it means, although you already had that, but it means that. So why do we find it so difficult to surrender? We know what it means, but why do we find it so difficult to surrender? There are many reasons, but if I'm trying to find the root cause of why we find it difficult to surrender, then these three things come to mind. Our minute independence. What does that mean? It's a degree of self-governance, self-rule, self-determination. And we have that. Our problem is that we are misusing it. We have misused it, and we continue to misuse it. But we are certainly not slaves, and we're not robots. We have that minute, by the Lord's grace, by his great, wonderful mercy on us. He didn't want slaves or robots. He wanted loving servants. So he gave that little minute independence, because as you will see as we go on, when we come to look at identity, we're really very small. So this minute independence, it creates problems for us. We have it, it's a wonderful thing. Self-rule, self-determination, but it all depends how we use it. Mm? So minute independence is one of the reasons why we find it difficult to surrender. And then the next one is desire. What does that mean? It's a strong feeling of wanting to have something, wanting to have something to happen. Feeling of wanting to have something, or wanting something to happen. And it's very, very important, because when you link it and they're all interconnected, that minute independence, and later on in other lectures, we're going to talk about where we've come from. We know where we are now, but we also have to fill in the missing blanks. Where have we come from? And how did we get here? Why did we come here? Well, our coming here, we weren't sent. That's for sure. We were not sent here. We exercised that minute independence and we chose to come here, okay? So wanting to do something, and that desire was a strong desire that we had, and that desire was fulfilled, So, and it links in then to the next one, choice. Maybe later on, I may switch the sequence of these slightly, but for now, that's how it's coming over to me in my realization. That it's our minute independence, it's our desire. I want to go over there into the material universe. I see what they're doing. It looks like fun. I want to go and have some of that fun, And then the choice, the act of choosing between two or more possibilities. So we could stay where we were and continue to serve, or we could actually choose to come over here. And the point of choice is extremely significant and important, because in Bhagavad Gita, after Lord Krishna speaks 18 chapters of wonderful transcendental instructions to Arjuna, in the concluding verses, one of them, forget exactly which verse, but the Lord says, Arjuna, have you heard very nicely? Have you heard everything? Now you decide what you want to do. The Lord gave him the choice. He didn't say, you must now do what I want to do. He gave. Now you deliberate on this and do what you want to do. The choice is never taken away. So our difficulty in surrendering is because of these things. We have that minute independence. We're not robots. We have a strong desire, and the desire is not to actually, be fully fixed up or remain in spiritual life. And we have the final bit of the clue is that our choice will be respected. And things happen according to our choice. So these are three factors that actually creates difficulty for us in surrendering fully. And until these three factors are properly lined up, then it becomes difficult for us to surrender. Okay. There's other factors as well, is that we have forgotten our identity. And for those who are just coming to Krishna consciousness, that is very clear. For those who are already in Krishna consciousness, then we are regaining. It's not that we have gained it, we are regaining our Krishna consciousness. And how we know we're regaining our Krishna consciousness is that we are now able to actually accept more and more on a more permanent basis the fact that we are Jivatmas, and run our bodily identity along with that. I'm male, I'm female, I'm whatever nationality, I'm whatever social class, I'm whatever professional status. We run that alongside the fact that, yes, I am Jivatma. But I also know that sometimes, because it's a learning process, and because it's a process of gradual realization, sometimes we struggle with that. We struggle with it sometimes. And we're not, we slip off the platform, of the fact that we're spirit souls, and we get back into the material consciousness. And this is a whole wonderful point of what Srila Prabhupada was trying to say to us and give us this method so that we can regain our Krishna consciousness, because we're completely immersed in material consciousness. So it's a process of gradual, first of all, discovering and making that wonderful connection. No, I am not this body, I'm spirit, soul. But once that connection has been made and advancement has been made, it's about becoming more and more until we're fully absorbed in that consciousness that we're not these bodies, but they're spirit, souls. And we can tell, one of the ways that we can tell, that we're making progress is to the degree by which we have a very genuine sense of compassion for other living entities. It's a very, very important factor. That which means a sense of hierarchy, the sense of prejudice will just disappear. It won't be there. I was saying to somebody just recently, and you'll see this being demonstrated by the sadhus. They don't make any distinction on bodily symptoms. I remember our Guru Maharaj, there was a festival, don't know if Nabi and Jayanti remember, in the temple, and there were gifts, because you probably would have organized the gifts, Nabi and Jayanti. There's a whole box of gifts, and there were many children were coming, and Guru Maharaj was giving prasad and giving gifts. But now the point of giving gifts, and it was gifts were being handed to him, or he was taking the gifts, and the children were lined up. And I remember there were some African and Caribbean children, and then there were the devotees' children. And Guru Maharaj was taking the gifts, and he wasn't making any distinction which gift went to what child. Within his hand, he's giving it to that child. There's no distinction about, oh, I don't know, you're not the temple devotee's child. There was no such, not a sense of that at all. It's the fact that you're a devotee, you're a child, you're in there, and then I'm going to serve you. Equally, when he's serving prasad, doesn't make any distinction. So when we know that we're on the spiritual platform, another example I should give you is that you'll see when children, I was saying on Friday, you'll see how children, the purity of heart is not that they're so much, they fully realize that they're spirit souls, but the purity of heart is there, and they're very spontaneously acting on that platform. I guarantee you can check the experiment. If you get a chance, watch it for yourself. As long as the children are at below a certain age, they haven't started yet to actually, below secondary school level, I would say. You watch them, they come together in an area of play or area of anything that brings them together, play or whatever, and they come together. And it's just the children. The adults are out of the way. You'll watch. They'll look at each other. They'll walk up to each other. They may be a little bit tentative at first, but after 5-10 minutes, they're all playing with each other. And they'll continue to play with each other. And they're not going to make any distinction about gender, about race, about what you look like. They won't make any of those material distinctions because the purity is in their hearts. It is simply seeing a child. It's simply seeing somebody who I can communicate with. This can be my friend. Okay, we can play something. We can do something together. We can have some interactions. So how we know we're making, proper spiritual progress, according to our spiritual identity, is when all the bodily designations, they do not become the basis that drives our activity. Then we can tell. So we have forgotten our spiritual identity. Because we are spirit souls, we're not these material bodies and all the very hardwired designations that come with the material bodies. My gender, my race, my class, my occupation, all of those things, they're very difficult to overcome. They influence us greatly. And it's not that they have no meaning, it's just that the higher meaning is that I'm spirit soul going through this journey at this moment. So in the Bhagavad Gita, it's very nicely all presented about our identity. It's very clear. And Srila Prabhupada makes it crystal clear. So what I'd like to do as far as possible in these classes is to bring Srila Prabhupada into the room through his purports. I don't want to bore anyone to death, but at the same time, I can tell you, it doesn't matter how I try. It doesn't matter how anybody tries, they can never speak about this philosophy better or clearer than Srila Prabhupada. Okay, they may add something, they may take a certain point that they want to emphasize, but they cannot actually have and give an overall picture better than Srila Prabhupada. So I'm not even going to try to do it, because I know that for an absolute fact. His purports are simply the very best, that we are able to receive in this time, and maybe long in the future to come, especially given that it's Kali Yuga. I do not see anyone coming who can do anything greater than what Srila Prabhupada has done as far as presenting Krishna consciousness. So Srila Prabhupada ki. So Srila Prabhupada is explaining to Arjun. Arjun is showing this sense of, I'm confused about my duty. And I've said many times, Arjun was not afraid. There was no sense of Arjun being afraid. He was simply overcome by compassion, And therefore, in that state of being overcome by compassion, actually, he was refusing to fight. And then all the confusion came. So Lord Krishna is speaking to him, and he starts, the instructions of Bhagavad Gita really starts with Lord Krishna clarifying the identity of Arjuna. So I'm going to actually start to do that as well for us to see. So the very nice first verse, it's not the first one, but it's the second verse that Lord Krishna speaks to Arjuna. Dihinosmin yataha dehi komaram yovanam jara tata dihantara prapti dhiras tatra namuyate. So that's Bhagavad Gita 2:13. Bhagavad Gita 2:13. And the translation is as the embodied soul continually passes in this body from boyhood to youth to old age, the soul similarly passes into another body at death, and a sober person is not bewildered by such a change. Then I shall now read the purport by Srila Prabhupada. Since every living entity is an individual soul, each is changing his body every moment, manifesting sometimes as a child, sometimes as a youth, and sometimes as an old man. Yet the same spirit soul is there and does not undergo any change. This individual soul similarly changes the body at death and transmigrates to another body. And since it is sure to have another body in the next birth, either material or spiritual, there is no cause for lamentation by Arjuna on account of death, neither for Bhishma or for Drona, for whom he was so much concerned. Rather, he should be rejoicing for their changing bodies from old to new ones, thereby rejuvenating their energy. Such change of body on the account for varieties of enjoyment and suffering, according to one's work in life. So Bhishma and Drona, being noble souls, were surely going to have spiritual bodies in the next life, or at least a heavenly body for superior enjoyment or material existence. So in either case, there is no cause for lamentation. A man who has perfect knowledge of the constitution of the individual soul, the super soul, and nature, both material and spiritual, is called Dhira, or most sober man. Such a man is never deluded by the change of bodies. So that point is very nicely made by Srila Prabhupada. Dihinosmin yataha dehi komaram yovanam jara tata dihantra praptiye dhiras tatra namuyati. And everyone can see, those devotees who are giving classes, then they've found their own ways to illustrate it. But it's always, stuck in my mind, because I certainly have played with so many different permutations of ways of explaining it. And you certainly know, when you're in that 3-year-old body, yes, you can remember. You can remember, yes, it's my birthday. You can remember I was wearing such and such clothing. Yes, and I remember my Matashri had the cake there, and I was cutting it, and I had so-and-so as a present. And those impressions are there. And if you're seeing that, and then you jump forward, you're 14 years old, and it's going through the same birthday process. But your body is very different. A 3-year-old body looks very different from a 14-year-old body. And then you jump forward another so many years. You're in a 25-year-old body. And then you jump forward, you're in a 60-year-old body. But when somebody shows you that picture, you're showing, your family life to somebody, and they see a picture of you at 3 years old. They're wondering, who is that? They can't tell it to you unless it's a family member. They can't tell it to you. But you can say very much, yes, it's me, I remember. All the details is very clear in my mind. But the body looks extremely different, completely different, you can say. So in this way, we know that although the body is changing, the consciousness is still there. The consciousness and the identity with the consciousness, that remains unchanged. And similarly, the verse goes on to say, at the time of death, when the body is no longer able to sustain us, the same consciousness moves out of that body into another consciousness, another body, as we prepared for it accordingly. So in this way, we can see that identity is very, very important, is spiritual. We go on then to the next verse, because these verses will actually clear the whole point. And I won't read all the purpose either. The next verse is saying, Matras pashastu konteya, sitoshna sukha dukhata, agmapayuno anityas, tamsatikshasva bharata. And the translation, O son of Kunti, the non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress, and their disappearance in due course, are like the appearance and disappearance of winter and summer season. They arise from a sense perception or seeing of Bharat. One must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. So there, Srila Prabhupada is talking about, Lord Krishna is explaining, is actually giving the instruction, Srila Prabhupada is explaining. It's about when you are in proper spiritual consciousness, you are able to tolerate the dualities of material life. And dualities of material life will be there. And it gives the example of the winter and the summer season. They will be there. We love summer, but we hate winter. But for the devotee and for the person who is really sober, you actually accept there is a winter, there is a summer, and there will be an autumn, and there will be a winter. And you accept it, it will come. And you prepare yourself for it in that way. So that duality is actually better accepted. Then, the 15th verse, Yam hi vyatatani eti purusham purushu shava samadukha sukham deram sa mritavatya kalpate. O best among the men, as a person who's not disturbed by happiness and distress, who's steady in both, is certainly eligible for liberation. So in that way, we have to get that sense of determination and to be fully fixed up.
I think meditation might not be moving. I think it's stuck.
Stuck on the SM bodied soul.
Yeah. I haven't got the slides there. They're not there. Sorry, they're not there. They're not there.
Right.
So I'll just read one more. Text 17. Avinashi tu tadvidhi yena sarvam idam tatam vinasham avayasyasya na kashit kartum arhasi. That which pervades the entire body, you should know to be indestructible. No one is able to destroy that imperishable soul. I'll read this purport. This verse is more clearly explained the real nature of the soul, which is spread all over the body. Anyone can understand what is spread all over the body. It's consciousness. Everyone is conscious of the pains and pleasure of the body, and is pain of the body in part or in whole. The spreading of consciousness is limited within one's body. The pains and pleasure of one body are unknown to another. Therefore, each and every body is the embodiment of an individual soul. So this point, as I said, for the devotees who are advanced and have been hearing for a long time, it becomes clear. it becomes clear to understand. And we're making progress on that road. For others who are coming into Krishna consciousness for the first time, this is a very important principle to grasp. If we do not understand this principle, we're going to struggle, because a lot of the decisions that we have to make, a lot of the realizations that we have to make will hinge on us accepting conclusively, not just for the sense of I'm associating with a religious group and that is their doctrine, is when we conclusively accept, no, I am not this body. And the practical point of this is that when we come to Krishna consciousness, whether you're from Bharatiya culture or you're from Western culture, African culture, Caribbean culture, generally we have got many bad habits in our eating, in our drinking, in our relationships. There are many bad habits. And when we have to give those habits up, it becomes a challenge. Take alcohol, take eating of meat, take illicit relationships. All those things become very difficult for us to give up. And they will remain difficult as long as we actually still have the concept that I am this body. One of the things that help us to make very, very quick progress along that road of giving up unwanted habits is when we actually are able to accept, no, I'm not this body. If I'm not this body, then I can give up those things connected to my body that have become habits or traditions or have been socialized into. It becomes easier. Where it becomes difficult is if we're thinking, and we all have a sense of that, as I said at the beginning, is that no, I have to do this. This is what I have to do. So we have to be very careful and accept what is being said here. So the pains and pleasures of one body is unknown to another. So that consciousness is located just within my body. I'm conscious of that, not anybody else's pains and pleasures. Therefore, each and every body is an embodiment of an individual soul. And the symptom of the soul's presence is perceived as individual consciousness. So we can tell I've got the soul is there because it's conscious. I'm conscious of me, I'm conscious of my pains and pleasures. And that consciousness, although the doctors can say what they want, the scientists can say what they want, they cannot find out. They're still thinking the consciousness, the so-called soul, is in the brain, or they don't know where it's located. But Bhagavad Gita will tell us where it's located. So, goes on the next verse. This material body of the indestructible, immeasurable, and eternal living entity is sure to come to an end. Therefore fight, O descendant of Bharat. So Krishna is giving further instruction. Never was it, never, neither he who thinks the living entity is slayer or slain, or thinks is in knowledge, for the self slays not, nor is slain. For the soul, there is neither birth nor death at any time. He has not come into being, he does not come into being, and will not come into being. He is unborn and eternal, ever existing and primeval. He is not slain when the body is slain. Purport. Qualitatively, the small atomic fragment part of the Supreme Spirit is one with the Supreme. He undergoes no change like the body. Sometimes the soul is called the steady or kutastha. The body is subject to 6 kinds of transformation. It takes birth from the womb of its mother. It remains for some time. It grows. It produces some effects, gradually dwindles, and at last vanishes into oblivion. The soul, however, does not go through such changes. The soul is born. The soul is not born, but because he takes on the material body, the body takes its birth. The soul does not take birth there, and the soul does not die. Everything which has birth has to die. And because the soul has no birth, he therefore has no past, present, or future. He is eternal, ever existent, and primeval. That is, There is no trace in history of his coming into being. Under the impression of the body, we see the history. We see the history of birth, etc. The soul has not at any time become old as the body does. The so-called old man, therefore, feels himself to be the same spirit as in his childhood or youth. The changes of the body do not affect the soul. The soul does not deteriorate like a tree or anything material. The soul has no byproducts either. The byproducts of the body, namely children, are also different individual souls, and owing to the body, they appear as children of a particular man. The body develops because of the soul's presence, but the soul has neither offshoot nor change. Therefore, the soul is free from the 6 changes of the body. It's a very important point being made there. So what I recommend the devotees to do also is to come to these classes with your Bhagavad Gita handy. It's not possible to put all the slides up, although preparation is always done before the classes. But have your Bhagavad Gita handy so that when the reference is made to the chapter, you can also, and then after the class, you can also go for further reading and get all the final details. You know, it's a big pressure to read the purport on a class like this, but the clarity comes from the purport. I could find, 10,000 words to say what Srila Prabhupada has just said in that purport, and I could not say it as clear as he has said it, because he's making it very distinct. The soul is very different. The point being made there, which is so nicely done by Srila Prabhupada, everything material will go through 6 transformations, and you can use that for yourself, use it in your preaching examples to actually set the distinction between something that is material and something that is spiritual. Anything that is material, it goes through 6 transformations. The first, it appears, there's a birth, it has a beginning, it develops, it produces some offsprings, it starts to dwindle, and then it disappears. There's what that distinction between that and something spiritual, it has only one symptom. It always was, it always will be. That's the very big distinction. It doesn't go through any transformation. It always was, always will be. Then that is who we are. We are spirit souls. If we accept that, that is the starting point of our surrendering, because we are not material. So if I backtrack a little bit and see the questions that was asked, our minute independence, our desire, and then our choices. So, but it all depends on how we see ourselves. We will not make the right, we will misuse our independence if we continue to think, on bodily designation, whether by country or by gender or by social standing. If we continue to make those decisions based on that, then our minute independence will always be misused. And then also our desires. We're desiring so many things, but is there any part of our desire that's about going back home? Is there any part of our desire which is about getting out of material repetition of birth and death? And then the final decision. That point about the decision is very, very important, because the Lord will not force. He will not force anyone. He wants us to love him. He wants us to serve him. He wants us to decide to come home. He won't force anybody. So the choices we make, all of these things are very, very significant. But what is equally significant is what we've just talked about, identity. If we do not know ourselves to be spirit souls, then these things will be always misused and misapplied. And they are connected to surrendering. When I stop misusing my independence, when my desire is growing in the direction of wanting to go home, and when my choices are to serve the Lord and to stay in the association of devotees, then we're making very, very nice progress along the way. I'm winding down now so I can stop for questions. In the Bhagavad Gita 9th chapter, the Lord speaks something, and I just one more purport to read from there. The Lord speaks something so nice to Arjuna. And find it here first. Yeah. So in that verse, second 9.2, Bhagavad Gita 9.2, Rajvidya Rajguyam Pavitram Idam Uttamam Pratyaksha Savaganam Dharmam Susukham Kartamavyayam. So the translation is, this knowledge is the king of education, the most secret of all secrets. This is the purest knowledge because it gives direct perception of the self by realization. It is perfection of religion, it is everlasting, and it is joyfully performed. Within that purport, which I said I can't put all the purports on there, it's just too much slides. So on page, and I recommend the devotees to have their Gitas with them, is on page 45092. Halfway down the page, Srila Prabhupada says, generally, people are not educated in this confidential knowledge. They are educated in external knowledge. As far as ordinary education is concerned, people are involved with so many departments: politics, sociology, physics, chemistry, mathematics, astronomy, engineering, etc. There's so many departments of knowledge all over the world and many huge universities, but there is, unfortunately, no university of education or educational institution where the science of the spirit soul is instructed. So all glories to Nabi Prabhu. Because the Vedic Institute is doing this. Prabhupada will be very pleased with this. Our Guru Maharaj will be very pleased with this. Because it's not about teaching anything else other than this science, this education. This is missing, this is required. Yet the soul is the most important part of the body. Without the presence of the soul, the body has no value. Still, people are placing great stress on the body and bodily necessities of life, not caring for the vital soul. The Bhagavad Gita, especially from the second chapter on, stresses the importance of the soul. In the very beginning, the Lord says that the body is perishable and that the soul is not perishable. Anvata antavanta ime dehi nityas yokta sharinaha. This is a confidential part of knowledge, simply knowing that the soul, the spirit soul, is different from the body and that its nature is immutable. So I read that again. This is a confidential part of knowledge, simply knowing that the spirit soul is different from the body and that its nature is immutable. That means unchangeable, indestructible, and eternal. But that gives no positive information about the soul. Sometimes people are under the impression that the soul is different from the body and that when the body is finished or one is liberated from the body, the soul remains in a void or becomes impersonal. But actually, this is not the fact. How can the soul, which is so active within the body, be inactive after being liberated from the body? It is always active. It is eternal. Then it is eternally active, and its activity in the spiritual kingdom are the most confidential part of the spiritual knowledge. These activities of the spirit soul are therefore indicated here as constituting the king of all knowledge, the most confidential part of knowledge. That is from the 9th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. So I'm starting slowly And I don't want to lose anybody on the way. Neither do I want to bore the devotees who have heard it many, many times. What I've said is devotees who know the shlokas, who know this, I said to you, see it as confirmation of knowledge, and then check yourself, how are you applying it in your own life? For the devotees who it's new to them, then take confidence, because we have to make decisions. The devotees who are just beginning or making a little progress in spiritual life, there are lots of choices that you have to make. You have to choose. Am I going to actually take this seriously? And in our next lesson, we'll talk about faith as well. Faith is a very important part of spiritual life and spiritual progress. Having faith. But the choices, how do we make choices all the time based on those three things that I've said, our minute independence, our desires, and then the choice. What will I eat? What will I watch? How will I spend my time? Where will I go? All these are based on the sense and will be determined by the sense of who we think we are. What's our sense of our identity? So seeing ourselves as spirit souls is the beginning foundation. That's laying the foundation by which we can actually start to consider and move along the path of surrendering. And surrender we must. And we'll talk about, as we expand these classes, we'll talk about what the alternatives are of not surrendering. Although we're already experiencing the alternatives of not surrendering, we want to spell it out so that the devotees know. And then we'll also, as part of these talks, we have to talk about what is it that will help us. And we've already started, but we'll name it. It's transcendental knowledge. And then we'll talk about devotional service. We'll piece it all together so that we get a sense of, when we understand it very nicely, then we can then start to make the right decisions, have the right desires, and make the right choices. So I'd like to stop here, invite questions, invite comments, and say again, there'll be a series. This is just an introduction, and I'll make it more rounded. I'll make it more interactive as well. But the theme will be to actually talk about what we've said as the main topic, surrender. And many other subtopics will come into it. As I said, transcendental knowledge, devotional service, faith, all of those will be brought in as they connect to the area. Okay? I'd like to invite questions, if devotees have questions. Gosh, I silenced everybody, Nabi. What have I done?
Siona, you got any questions? Oh, actually,
Hello?
I thought you were.
No, not really, not really.
No. Who's Chantel?
Yeah, sorry, it's that's my Google name. I need to change that. Everyone gets confused.
Yeah. But my question to you then, Chantal, if you don't have a question to me, my question to you, as part of my feedback, is that does it make sense? Is it clear? Because anything that isn't clear, I want to clarify, and that's a whole point of Nabi's presentation and Nabi's having the seminar, is to make these points clear, is to help you to get the clarity. So if there's any aspect of it that's not clear, then you need to let us know. We'll find a better way to make it clear.
Yeah, to be honest, I was in and out
Okay.
of the session anyway, but it's hard to really explain. Yeah, I do understand.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
But what I said was, I'm giving you permission. I'm giving all the others permission. Your questions are never going to be too simple, because it all depends where we are. In the beginning of our spiritual life, we actually have to ask simple questions, because it depends what background we're coming from. And those questions, can become very big stumbling block for us unless we get an answer to them. So don't be afraid of asking your questions, okay? As and when they arise.
I think your seminar was pitched right. It's not even basic. I would say it's good to have this refresher every now and then. Good. And it's always good to just reiterate, because the mind always plays tricks.
It does.
Surrendering is so absolutely fundamental. And of course, it's a surrender of love, not of force.
Precisely. And all of that is going to come out, you know, in subsequent lectures, because we're going to see, and stories will come into it. Because, for instance, I'll show you what I mean, Nabi, is that I wanted to talk about the Brahmins' wives. Yeah, the Brahmins' wives, because it's Janmashtami, you know, period. I wanted to talk about them because that surrender was out of love, but it's a really nice illustration of surrender. The Brahmins didn't want to surrender, you know, they couldn't see it, but the Brahmins' wives surrendered to Krishna out of just pure love. So at some stage we'll share that and other leelas like that. So totally agree, it's out of love, but it's how we get to that point where we're choosing, and the Lord does not take away a choice at any stage. He will give us a choice. You want to stay here, and that's actually not to make another class, but that is how we change bodies. We change bodies, a lot of it is by the choices and desires that we have. A lot of it is about that. They're big factors, not only our karmas, but, you know, along with that desire that we have, that is also very, very important part of how, okay, you want to do that? Okay, I'll facilitate it. I'll help you to achieve it, because the super soul will do that. The Lord is so kind. He's a very, very perfect parent. He will help you to get what you want. But is that going to help us? Anyway, we'll talk about it some more. Okay, Prabhu. So, yeah.
I have a question.
Yes.
If everyone is the soul and not the body, then
yes.
Why are there no women who take sannyas?
Well, you know, that question's been asked so many times. But I'll tell you this. There are etiquettes, especially in our tradition, the etiquettes that are there, they are always for very, very good reasons. In some spiritual ashrams, you'll find that the rules for men and for women are different, but they're not different on the basis of, in the West, prejudice. That never actually happens within, I'm saying it may happen now, this is Kali Yuga, but within the Vedic tradition, the segregation, let me start simple and then I'll come to the elaborate. When I first came to Krishna consciousness and I came to a temple and I saw men sitting on one side and women sitting on one side, I thought it was prejudice. I thought it was strange. You know, it was strange for me. But then as I go along and then Guru Maharaj would explain, and the devotees would explain, and then as I read more, then I was able to understand this is not segregation. This is not prejudice. This is a division that is required. And then it really, really made sense to me when I read in Srimad Bhagavatam that, you know, woman is like fire and man is like butter. And my imagination is so vivid with things like that. That's why I can't watch horror films. Because if I watch horror films, I'll never sleep. My imagination is too strong. But that same imagination is very good for Srimad Bhagavatam because it takes the stories and it makes it very elaborate. So just say, woman is like fire and man is like butter. Now just put it together and put the proximity together. Fire and butter, who melts? It's the men. And then segregation became understandable. But using that example, then going back to your question, you'll find that the sadhus, which is all coming down in Guru Parampara from Lord Brahma onwards, there's certain things that are best, conducted by male in their bodies and female in their bodies. But it doesn't diminish the quality of the female devotees. There's so many. Mother Anasuya, Mother Draupadi, Queen Kunti. No one's going to actually say anything about these, Sati Mataji. These were wonderful, exalted devotees, and the Shastra is full of exalted female devotees. Shubhra Mataji in Ramayan Leela, there's so many. But it doesn't mean that the Guru Parampara is actually transmitted through them. It doesn't diminish them to say they have no spiritual ability, they have no spiritual acumen. But it's just a bit like I can give you a crude example. They're both mother and father are parents. But that woman, Mataji, she cannot produce the child. The child is actually given by the father. Not that they're not equal, but their role is different. He gives the seed and she nurtures and carries the baby. So these distinctive roles are there, set by the Lord. So it's not that there's prejudice, it's just that it's better if that activity is done by that person, in that gender. The father can't carry the baby. He doesn't have a body for carrying a baby. He may give the baby, but he can't carry it. The mother has a body for carrying the baby and maintaining it. So it's no prejudice. I can assure you, whilst prejudice may be there in today's society and prejudice may be there in some ashrams, this is Kali Yuga. But I'm talking now, as I'm speaking to you, I'm talking about, the sadhus coming down in Guru Parampara. I can tell you, there's no prejudice there. It's simply division according to what is best for the transmission of spiritual knowledge. Does that help, Mataji? Hare Krishna?
Yeah, just...
Yes, thank you, Prabhu.
Chitra, if you think
Yes,
Bandar Mataji should take sannyas, think like...
No, Prabhu, I'm okay here.
So I just slipped that in,
I don't mind.
Oh, Jayanti said she doesn't mind. Okay, she's orange. The other thing, I think just the point about sannyas is in Kali Yuga, actually, Vyasadev has said nobody should really take sannyas because it's just too hard. Of course, Prabhupada gave for the purpose of preaching. But if one is not going to use that sannyas ashram for preaching, then actually there's no purpose for sannyas in this age of Kali.
Exactly. Thank you, Prabhu. This is true. So, any other questions from anyone?
Okay, that's good. Thank you very much, Prabhu. That was excellent.
Well, there'll be more to come, as I said, and we'll follow next week. I can actually tell the devotees now what the next week will be, because we have it here. So why do we find it so difficult? What does it mean? So why is it demanded by the Lord? So I can go a little bit, I'll do half and half. I haven't said enough about why it's so difficult. I've said some things, but I'll say a little bit more about that, and then why it's demanded by the Lord. So that will be the theme for next week, okay?
Good. Yeah, that's fine. Just a bit of news. You know Trikalagya and Tungavidya Mataji are
Yes. They're not well. Oh.
Yeah, they're in hospital.
Corona?
Yeah, and it's
not
good. The very latest, I'll just read it. This is from their son, Ramdas. Ma is in critical condition.
Oh no.
Her heart is weak. She's unconscious.
Oh, Krishna.
Oxygen machine. She's not on a ventilator because her heart is too weak.
Oh, Krishna.
Not good, yeah. And for Prabhu, he's now on a oxygen machine. That in the morning he wasn't, now he is. Also, as his levels have dropped slightly just below normal, so he's not as bad, but he's been given oxygen. That's not good. They are taking precaution and being proactive to get his levels up again. Still dealing with fevers, cough, and congestion.
Oh, Krishna.
So, yeah. I mean, every satsang we're now doing, we're just dedicating it to them.
Okay. Okay. Well, I do Bhagavad Gita reading on a daily basis, so I will also start to do a chapter for them.
Yeah, that'd be good. Yeah.
Okay.
So now we can do the Nishinga Kavach,
Okay.
and as I said, everything is for them.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, I can do it. Let me just get the Kavach up. And we have our expert here who recites the Kavach so nicely.
Yes, sir, Prabhu.
No. I know. How do we get to our thing?
Should I stop sharing? I need to stop sharing, Navi.
Maybe try that. Yeah. Try that if that works. Yeah. No. Where is it? Just 1 second. We just having a little technical issue. Just 1 second. Need to get a little bit more technically au fait here. Strange. Where it is?
I can still see my slides, so let me take them away.
No, it's not. It's not your side. That's the problem. It's my side. We're just being a bit thick here. But anyway, it's okay. Karuna Banda, you do it on a hard copy anyway. So please carry on. And I've got my side or something, but nobody else can see it. So.
Okay, I start.
Yes, please.
Shri Lakshmi Nrsimha ki jai, Prahlad Maharaj ki jai, Shri Prabhupada ki jai, Guru Maharaj ki jai. Narsimha kavacham vakshe, Prahladena ditam pura, Sarvarakshakaram punyam, Sarvopadravanashanam, Sarvasampatkaram chaiva, Swargamuksha pradayakam, Dhyadva Narasimham devesham, Hemasimhasanastitam, विपरीतास्यं त्रिनयनं शरदिन्दुशमाप्रभं लक्ष्म्यालिङ्गितवामाङ्गं विभीरुपाश्रितं चतुर्भुजं कोमलाङ्गं स्वर्णकुन्दरशोभितं श्रिया सुशोभितोरस्कं रत्नकेयूरमुद्रितं तप्तकाञ्चनशङ्काशं पीतनिर्मलवाससम् इन्द्रारीसुरमौलिष्ठ सुरन्माणिक्यदीप्तिभिः विराजितपदधर्वं शङ्खचक्रादिहेतुभिः गरुत्मता च विनयात् स्तूयमानं मुदान्वितं स्वरितकमलसंवासं कृत्वा तु कवचं पतेत् नरसिंहो मे शिरः पातु लोकरक्षात् सम्भव सर्वगोपीस्तम्भवास फालं मे रक्षतु ध्वनिं नरसिंहो मे दिशो पातु सोमसूर्यानिरोचना स्मृतं मे पातु नरहरि मुनिवार्यस्तुतिप्रिय नासं मे सिंहनाशस्तु मुखं लक्ष्मीमुखप्रिय सर्वविद्यादिपापातु नरसिंहो रसनां मम वक्त्रं पाद्बिन्दुवदनं सदा प्रह्लादवन्दित नरसिंह पातु मे कण्ठं स्कन्धो भूभरणान्तकृत् दिव्यास्त्रशोभितभुज नरसिंह पातु मे भुजौ करो मे देवा वरदो नरसिंह पातु सर्वतः हृदयं योगी साध्याश्च निवासं पातु मे हरि मध्यं पातु हिरण्याक्ष वक्षाकुक्षिविदारण नाभिं मे पातु नरहरि स्वनाभिब्रह्म संस्थिता ब्रह्मादकोतया कट्यां यास्य सो पातु मे कटिं गुह्यं मे पातु गुह्यानां मन्त्राणां गुह्यरूपद्रि कुरु मनोभव पातु जानुनी नररूपद्रि जाङ्गी पातु धराभार हर्ता योऽसौ नृकेशरी सुरराजप्रद पातु पादौ मे नरहेश्वरा सहस्रशीर्षा पुरुषा पातु मे सर्वसस्तनु महुग्रह पूर्वतः पातु महावीराग्रजोन्मिता महाविष्णु दक्षिणे तु महाज्वालस्तु नैऋतौ पश्चिमे पातु सर्वेषु दिशि मे सर्वतोमुखः नरसिंह पातु वायव्यां सौम्यां हेशनविग्रह ईशान्यां पातु भद्रो मे सर्वमङ्गलदायकः संसारभयतः पातु मृत्योर्मृत्योनिकेशरी इदं नरसिंहं कवचं प्रह्लादमुखमन्डितं भक्तिमान् यपते नित्यं सर्वपापैः प्रमुच्यते पुत्रवान् धनवान् लोके दीर्घायुरुपजायते यं यं कामयति कामं तं तं प्राप्नोति असंशयम् सर्वत्र जयमाप्नोति सर्वत्र विजयी भवेत् भूयन्तरिक्षदिव्यानां ग्रहाणां विनिवारणम् वृश्चिकरोगसम्भूत विषापाहरणं परं ब्रह्मरक्षास्य याक्षाणां दुरोत्सारणकारणं भुजे वा तालपत्रे वा कवचं लिखितं शुभं करमूले धृतां येन सिद्धेयुकर्मसिद्धय देवासुर्मनुष्येषु स्वं स्वम् एव जयं लभेत् एकसन्ध्यं त्रिसन्ध्यं वा यापते नियतो नरः सर्वमङ्गलमङ्गल्यं भुक्तिं मुक्तिं च विन्दति द्वात्रिंशतिसहस्राणि पाठेषोधात्मविर्निधि कवचस्यास्य मन्त्रस्य मन्त्रसिद्धि प्रजायते अनेन मन्त्रराजेन कृत्वा भस्माभिर्मन्त्रणम् तिरकम्भिर्याद्यस्तु तस्य ग्रहभयं हरेत् त्रिवारं जपमानस्तु दत्तं वर्याभिमन्त्रस्य प्रशयेद्यं नरं मन्त्रं नरसिंहध्यानमाचरेत् तस्य रोगप्रणश्यन्ति ये चक्षुकुक्षिसम्भव किमत्र बहुनोक्तेन नरसिंहसदृशो भवेत् मनसा चिन्तितं यत्तु स तच्चाप्नोत्यसंशयम् गर्जन्तं गर्जयन्तं निजभुजपटलं शोधयन्तं हतन्तं दीप्यान्तं तापयन्तं दिवि भुवि दितिजं क्षेपयन्तं क्षिपन्तं क्रान्तान्तं रोषयन्तं दिशि दिशि सततं संहरन्तं भरन्तं दीक्षान्तं पूरयान्तं करनिकरशते दिव्यसिंहं नमामि इति श्रीब्रह्माण्डपुराणे प्रह्लादोक्तं श्रीनरसिंहकवचं सम्पूर्णम् श्री लक्ष्मी नरसिंहदेव की जय प्रहलाद महाराज की जय शपोपाद की जय गुरु महाराज की जय हरे कृष्ण
Hare Krishna. Krishna Bandar ki jai.
महाराज की जय
Kamakshi is there? Yes. Kamakshi Mataji.
Haribo?
Hare Krishna. Let's sing for Trikal and Tunga Vidya. Huh?
Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Guru Maharaj ki jai. Namaste Narasingaya Praladalaadaine Hiranyakashi Purvakshaya